Fires engulf Noumea, symbols of authority targeted. Noumea, the capital of New Caledonia, became a scene of chaos as flames engulfed key government buildings. The police station and town hall, symbols of authority, were deliberately set ablaze, signaling a serious escalation in civil unrest. Firefighters battled the blazes while law enforcement struggled to contain the unrest, painting a stark picture of a city on edge. News outlets broadcast images of the burning buildings, highlighting the severity of the situation. The targeting of government buildings pointed to a clear message of defiance and rejection of the status quo. These acts represented a culmination of long-standing grievances and a desperate cry for attention from a marginalized community. The road to recovery, both physically and socially, will be long and arduous, requiring open dialogue and genuine commitment to addressing the root causes of this unrest. Unrest spreads beyond Noumea. Reinforcements deployed. The unrest quickly spread to other parts of the mainland and the Loyalty Islands, overwhelming local law enforcement. The French government deployed military units specializing in riot control and additional police officers, creating a heavy security presence. The arrival of French troops was met with mixed reactions, with some residents welcoming the increased security and others viewing it as a provocation. Checkpoints were established and curfews imposed to restrict movement and deter further unrest. Despite these measures, clashes between protesters and security forces continued, highlighting the volatility of the situation. The deployment of reinforcements, while intended to restore order, added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. Electoral reform ignites deep-seated tensions. A proposed electoral reform plan ignited deep-seated tensions between the Indigenous Kanak people and those of European descent. The plan, seen by many Kanaks as a threat to their pursuit of independence, sparked widespread protests and demonstrations. The proposed reforms would have limited voting rights in future referendums on independence, effectively diminishing the voice of the indigenous population. The Kanak people argue that they have been marginalized and discriminated against, and that their land and resources have been exploited. The French government argues that the reforms are necessary to ensure stability, but critics see it as a thinly veiled attempt to maintain French control. The violence that has ensued is a clear indication that a negotiated solution addressing the concerns of all stakeholders is. Section 4. Damage Assessment and the French Response. As the fires died down, the true extent of the damage began to emerge. The smoldering ruins of the police station and town hall stood as stark reminders of the violence that had gripped Noumea. Numerous businesses were looted and vandalized, leaving a trail of destruction. The French government condemned the violence and pledged to restore order, promising financial assistance for rebuilding efforts. However, many residents felt these measures were insufficient and failed to address the underlying issues driving the unrest. Critics argued that the focus should be on addressing the root causes of the unrest, such as the proposed electoral reforms and the historical grievances of the Kanak people. The long-term stability of this overseas territory hinges on finding a peaceful and equitable solution that respects the rights and aspirations of all its. Section 5. Clashes erupt in Noumea's districts. Clashes between police and protesters erupted in various districts, including Dumbi, Ducos, and Magenta. Barricades were erected, tires set ablaze, and projectiles hurled, creating a chaotic environment. The confrontations highlighted the deep-seated anger and frustration felt by many, particularly among the Kanak youth. In Dumbi, clashes erupted near a nickel processing plant, a key industry in New Caledonia. The clashes in Ducos were particularly intense, with reports of tear gas and rubber bullets being used to disperse crowds. Magenta became a focal point for protests against police brutality, further inflaming tensions. The widespread nature of the clashes demonstrated that the unrest reflected widespread discontent and a sense of disenfranchisement. Section 6. Community impact. School closures and lingering uncertainty. The unrest in Noumea disrupted daily life, creating a climate of fear and uncertainty. Schools were forced to close, leaving parents scrambling to find childcare and disrupting the education of thousands of children. The closures highlighted the far-reaching consequences of the unrest, impacting even the most vulnerable members of society. The violence and destruction shook the sense of security and community that many residents once took for granted. The closure of schools disrupted routines and deprived children of access to education and social interaction. As the community begins the long process of healing and rebuilding, it faces the daunting task of bridging the divides that have plagued New Caledonia for far too long.